So deja vu, I'm back from the future. Great. Variability, our goal is really, consistency of targeted fruit, and that's going to pay top dollar. And that's what we want to try and do. And, we saw this morning, we can measure an orchard and we go down and we look at this. This is just tree counts down a row. The variability, each of the different colours is actually a segment, a quarter within the tree. So even within the tree, there's variation as you go down the row, as well as that total count. And we get this variability. And, and as we saw this morning, we can get digital maps and everything else that sort of show us where all this variability is. But at the end of the day, my job's to get in the paddock, have a chat to the jockey. How do we improve this? How do we get better at what we're doing to create a better result? So one of the things we talk about influencing, and this morning we saw the influence of dealing with spreaders and sprayers and those sort of mechanical things, but we influence the orchard in this variability sense with our personal signatures. Every worker that goes in and touches that tree in terms of pruning, thinning, picking, and that has their own signature. So rows get altered with their own influence. And so how do we create consistency in that process? So, in that process, we start at an orchard level and we have 600,000 buds potentially in orchard, 2 million flowers, 800,000 apples then to manually thin, and 400,000 apples to harvest. At a tree level, how can we create the focus a little bit better? And a lot of our metrics we talk about, we give people targets on a tree level. Prune the tree to this speed, I want this number on it, and those sorts of things. But to create better results, I think we need to segment the task even further. So we need to section the tree down, we need to narrow the focus to create improved execution. So we can have, a traditional tree. For me, this is an old style tree, a tall spindle tree, and we look at it and we said, I'll prune the tops, take 3 branches out, unders and overs and whatever else. But if we spend the time to talk about this tree with an individual leader within the orchard, the jockey, we segment the tree down to that branch level, and and if I can teach them how to prune that 35 to 40 centimetres branch, they can prune the whole tree. And so we section it down to that sort of level, and we keep the task focused at a smaller and smaller zone, and then we can get our execution improved and our signature with less variation. So if we talk about my favourite subject, formal two-dimensional orchards, we start off with a formal two-dimensional orchard, and the section is in this particular orchard's 8 wires. The 6.5 wires filled. So I'm sitting at about 75% yield capacity in that orchard. It's fixed. I can't fill any more. So I know my yield estimate. I start off with a process early in the winter. I start doing floral counts on the buds within that, and I work out where my floral bud number is. I then can look at a section of wood and work out my pruning regime. And if I look at that, my pruning regime can be down to saying I want 1 bud per 8 centimetres to give me my 400,000 apples a hectare. So I can take 100 hectares down to managing in an 8 centimetre segment. And this is one of the QCs in the orchard has this stick. Not every pruner, not every thinner has this stick laid in the orchard to give them that. But anyone who's starting to drift or manage the approach, they can use this and just get a feel for it. It could be a hand width, it could be a secateurs length, whatever those segments are, we can create really focused rules if we look at this. And then we come back to saying within that formal two-dimensional orchard, we have a trunk-to-trunk measurement, which we want 17 apples in, which will give us our 400,000 apples a hectare, which will calculate out about 95 tonnes. So segmenting each task down to a really tight level allows us to create focus and better execution. So we can bring it right down to this level of 8 centimetre window. The other thing, if you've got a highly biennial variety, and you might find that in one of the rules we'll set, if the bud sequence, if we're thinning, for example, and there's no apple in that 8 centimetre window, I'm allowed two apples in the next window, but I can't stack all the apples at one end of the branch because the branch will get out of balance, my fruit quality will swing, and the bud and the return bloom will alter next year. So we're looking at bienniality in such a focus. We're looking at it, side to side within a very narrow window. Segmentation, back to this whole canopy, instead of just saying my fruit count is 200 fruit per tree, I'm looking at a wire gap, I'm looking at a branch length. I've got 8 counts per tree that I'm looking at the variation, managing that within the window of my canopy. So again, segmentation, maybe it's a little bit of a bridge too far, but a few of my growers actually manually flower thin. So when we prune to real detail, there was a conversation about pears yesterday, we need to prune down our bud number to improve our fruit size. Well, in terms of getting better fruit quality, in terms of dry matter and size and everything else, if we can get that thinning done accurately really early on, we can improve our quality. So in some orchards and some varieties, we're blossom thinning. And so when we've got this focus down really tight, we can actually look at hand bloom thinning. So the second thing I want to focus on around variability is we need to focus on light. And if we focus on light, what's the result? We get better crunch, right? Or everything else being equal, if we just focus on light, we get better crunch, better texture. We get better colour. One of my key growers said to me 15 years ago, if you want to make a mark, you make sure you can get us fruit colour. If I have fruit colour, I've got choice at harvest time. I can decide to pick it today with better pressure, better storage ability, or I can delay it and get a little bit more size. But if I've got no colour, I'm waiting, and my quality and my storage ability is going downhill day by day. So colour's everything. The other thing about focusing on light, all being equal, is we'll get better bricks, better dry matter in their fruit. And what does that result in? It results in a customer who's ultimately satisfied with what we're delivering them. It's a great piece of fruit. It's just that ecstasy that you get when you taste a really good apple. So if we look at variability within a canopy, and this was one of my studies within 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional canopies. Canopy 1 is a 2-dimensional canopy. The variability from top to bottom on the canopy as we're approaching harvest, all of that canopy was pickable. There was a slight variation in the bottom, but it was pickable on day one, top to bottom. And if you've got that and you start picking 80% of your fruit, 65% of your fruit in one pick, the labour efficiency really improves dramatically. Canopy 2 was a 3-dimensional canopy, sort of 1.2, 1.5 metres in depth, but you're starting to get variation low in the canopy. And you're going to have to really watch. And inversely, what people tend to do is they'll go and pick all the fruit in the top of the tree, which is actually the lowest maturity in the tree, and then they'll work their way down the canopy, which is actually the most mature in the fruit, and you've left it another 10 days, so it's low colour, poorer quality, and not going to store as well. So understanding this impact of colour. So how do we describe light interception in a canopy? And if you saw these canopies and what the ideal, how do you describe the ideal situation in a canopy in terms of light? Anyone? Cool. So you can talk about it and say, I need to have at least 800 micromoles, of light. I can talk about photosynthetic active radiation and all these technical terms, and I go out with my light meter and look at these things, and you can say, yep, that's what I need to do. And you look at, okay, if that's an ideal canopy, the fruit's all exposed, it's got great colour, what is it when I'm talking to people in the orchard about what I'm doing? And so my language now is talking about texture, the texture of the canopy, the feel, the appearance, the consistency of a surface or a substance. And it's a really weird word to start using in terms of horticulture and standing in an orchard. But as we go through it, you'll hopefully get a sense of what I'm talking about. So Canopy texture to me is the ability to get light evenly through the canopy. And when we're out in the paddock, I haven't got my light meter, I've got 5 people trying to understand what I'm talking about, and we talk about visual cues. So the first one is, I want to be able to see through the canopy 3 to 5 rows, not to the trunk. And I need to maintain windows through the canopy. So if we look at the differences in canopies, you look at canopy on the right, it's okay, I can just see through to the next canopy, but the canopy on the right is a brick wall. You know, and you're only going to have great quality fruit on the outside of that canopy. So again, in the canopy on the left, you're starting to see through the canopy. You know there's going to be some reasonable light falling through, and you're struggling to see towards the trunk on that one on the left. So you need to just have simple cues in the orchard to describe how we look at our canopy. This one might be a little bit open. That particular grower was about 6 rows over, 7 rows over, and maybe we're not capturing as much light. But it's really surprising when you look at these trees that are slightly too weak, that aren't filling their canopy, a lot of them are producing the highest volume of fruit, of targeted fruit in the orchard. And the size of the tree that we need to do to achieve our target is relatively small. We're growing way too much wood, and the light quality is very poor. So simple cues in terms of 3 to 5 rows through. The other one is managing windows, and when we're talking about managing windows, I talk about, and this is this thing about with formal canopies, I have this ability to create windows through the canopy. And when I'm in these vertical systems, how can I create those windows or rules around generating a window? And you might look at wire gaps within a canopy structure. What is the sequence that I have, the number of little laterals that I'm holding fruit on between wires? So again, in formal systems, relatively simple to generate and keep the canopy open in terms of what it's doing. The picture on the right-hand side there is actually Braeburn. So we're growing all varieties on a formal system, and I think the accumulated yield on that Braeburn block is about 113 tonnes. Sorry, the average yield over 4 years is 113 tonnes. So we can produce really good results on varieties. Maintaining windows, I showed you this one earlier about amending canopies to create windows in existing canopies, so we can actually get this light quality and be able to see through a canopy and generate light. So again, the next cue I want to bring in is saying we need to maintain 50% shade. Maybe I should really have put that around the other way. I need to have 50% light. And what do I mean by that? Only 50%? I thought in all the science, Jackson and Palmer were talking about 70%, and then the yield tapers off, in terms of light capture. But it's about the quality of the light. And so when we think about the quality of light, if you look at an orchard at 10 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when you've got that maximum shadow across the tree and you're looking into the orchard, you need to be thinking about the quality of the light hitting the ground. If it's black, that light's not moving through to parts of the canopy, and it's not getting to the fruit in the bottom part of the canopy. And even the photo on the left-hand side there, it's got, dark patches, a lot of light, dark patches and a lot of light. It's not a really well-structured light, but it's got some light windows through the tree, through that canopy. It's quite distracting, just blinking here, the screen. Anyway. And so you start moving into 50. So look at the canopy on the right-hand side. Has got a lot of light and then some really solid dark patches, but you'd say that canopy's not really filling in. And the texture that I want to try and get to in a lot of my orchards is something more to what's on the left, when you actually have dappled light falling right through the canopy. And so when you put reflective mulch down, you just get a whole great sequence of photos in terms of what you're trying to achieve with this thing of light falling through the canopy. Again, this is about a 10-year-old two-dimensional canopy, but beautiful light sequence through the whole canopy at harvest time. So again, that drives me into this whole thing about three-dimensional to two-dimensional and trying to create light windows and that. So when you're in the orchard, you don't always have to carry a light meter with you. It's just really simple things about remember the rule, be able to see through the canopy, 3 to 5 rows, think about 50% shade. If you want to get technical and take your light meter out, anything under 800 micromoles, the leaves aren't really functioning. Anything above sort of 1,000, there's excess there in terms of carbohydrate generation. So just in summary, getting out in the paddock with the gumboots on and talking to the jockeys, it's segment the task. How do we actually, whatever our instructions are, how do we segment the task to create focus, to improve execution? And then this whole thing about light, if we want less variability and we want great harvestability and we want high quality fruit, we've got to have simple rules about understanding light. Light is what the business is about. We're harvesting light to generate sugars, to transport through the tree, to get to the fruit, to then store as carbohydrate, to then convert back to sugars later on. It's all about light. So we have to generate and understand how we improve that. But if we have a brick wall in our orchard, the outside of the canopy is doing okay, the rest of it's not. But if we can get light generation through the whole canopy for most of the season, we'll have excellent fruit. Thanks.